Ceili McCabe, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for having me.
So you won a Big 12 cross country title this past weekend. What are the feelings heading into a new week where I'm sure it's that mixed balance of celebrating, but also there's more work ahead? What's your emotion level
Yeah, I
at right
think
now?
over the past few years, obviously been in this specific week a few times where you're coming off of an important weekend, but there's still hopefully two more races to go, and those are definitely the most important. So I always think this next couple weeks is like the hardest few weeks of the season because just I think the highest stress, but also trying to um, be as relaxed and take as much momentum as you can from the preceding races. But I think it's definitely a balance to kind of be prepared, but also be a little bit relaxed.
You know, as you being an Olympian, 8-time All-American, I know you have bigger fish to fry than winning conference titles as much as I'm sure you wanted to win. What is the balance right now where you're maybe, and this is maybe a conversation you've had with your coaches, you can maybe squeeze out a little more fitness between now and nationals, but you're also probably recovering a little bit. What do these next 2 weeks look like from a physical and mental preparation standpoint where nationals is always the goal, but also Big 12s was a big deal as well?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I constantly have to um, think about. Honestly, take it day by day because it is easy to get ahead of yourself. I think by this point I kind of know what is coming in the next few weeks in terms of the level of competition. And so just being able to want to get as much out of myself as possible while also knowing that kind of the best way for me to compete at the level that I want to in November is to just be consistent and be as healthy as possible. I think when you do those things, that's kind of lets you maybe have the home run, whereas getting an extra ounce out of yourself in a workout sometimes has the opposite of effect for the weeks for going forward. So it is, yeah, just taking it day by day and knowing that my coach kind of has that kind of planned in his head, and that I just have to try to be steady as possible.
Do you get nervous at all for these big races, these big meets? Are you pretty even headed? You're very experienced in the NCAA. What's your thought process going into these final few weeks of the season, into these big races?
Yeah, I think I sometimes can approach it a little bit differently each year, having some more experience. But I think ultimately I still get quite nervous before. I'm generally a type of person that if I can make it to the race day, I'm fine, and I'm pretty collected the day of the race. But I definitely have had times where, yeah, getting that week of the race I kind of hate. And you obviously you're tapering a little bit. You're preparing, and that's when I tend to feel the most stressed. But I think once I can get to race day, and then yeah, having some of the experience, and it comes together somewhat smoothly, I'd say.
If I'm not mistaken, as a sixth year in the NCAA, that comes with a lot of experience. What are some of the biggest ways you feel like you've grown in terms of approaching high level championship racing from year one compared to year six here?
I think honestly, I think even from when I first came into the NCAA, I was always pretty good at, I guess, knowing kind of what I was in for, and knowing that there was a high level of competition. I think that I was always pretty good at recognizing that there are really quality runners and good competition. And so I think that was something where then I would go into races pretty much with the same mindset each year. And then really the goal was just to be a little bit better each year and to compete a little bit better. And so I think that I've been able to kind of approach things pretty similarly, which has been nice because it's consistent. But then also just knowing how is best for me to prepare, I think has been some big, I guess, areas for growth, which in previous times I would get a little bit stressed in the weeks leading up, try to do a little bit too much. And I think I still have those tendencies now, but I think it's kind of developing to know that sometimes just getting to the start line is as smoothly as you can is really what makes the difference between being able to win a race or falling off a little earlier.
What would you say to someone listening? We'll frame it as a high school because if I say college, maybe some of your competitors are listening. We don't want to help them out too much. So let's frame this as like a middle school or a high schooler going into a big race. What would be some advice in terms of how to excel within that race? I'm sure I was at the state meet in Ohio this past weekend for high school, and a thought I had, which was a thought I had in high school, was it's just crazy. Like June 1st is like the official, unofficial day of training for cross country in Ohio. And
Hmm.
the meets in November, and it's like, wow, you put in endless months of work for this little 15-minute race. Like there's so much that goes into it. And with that, I think there's a lot of pressure and expectation that people put on themselves. What
Hmm.
would be some advice to someone out there who has a big race coming out up? They want to maximize it, but they don't want to be too in their head about one specific race or event of their career.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think, like, honestly, the whole, um, I mean, this is, yeah, true for college and it's true for high school where the season definitely builds and it is hard to kind of take it more relaxed day by day and like make it to the end of the season. I would say for these big kind of races coming up, I think it's about just trying to, obviously you're working on things as the season progresses and you're trying to improve, but I think being relaxed and knowing that what you how you approach a race is good enough, like, could, I guess, like pretty much being having that kind of self-confidence of the way that you approach things, not trying to change too much what you want to do, running the race that you want, kind of no matter what. I mean, obviously you have to adapt to the competition as well, but yeah, staying true to kind of the way that you approach things, I think, has been something that has helped me stay consistent and kind of keep improving. Is just, yeah, not trying to kind of change the way that I approach races.
How much do you think people going for home runs the day of championship races ultimately backfires on them? Maybe 1 out of 10 work out and they live to tell the tale, but from my experience, most of the time it ends up backfiring. And if you actually go for a solid performance, that's usually more than enough for you to be proud of your performance.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where as the season builds, you'll kind of know, I guess, get a sense of where you are, and I think staying within yourself doesn't always mean being cautious, but it means that you're kind of confident in what you've been building and how you've been progressing with the year and not trying to do anything that is so much outside of that. I think for me, like, it was where I could see earlier, even this year, I kind of took, say, like, take a risk necessarily, but my goal at pre-nats was to kind of stay in the race as long as I could. I like to kind of contend from the front, and it didn't totally work out, and I kind of fell off a little bit earlier than I was hoping for. And in that case, I think it was like, okay, like, that was a shock to the body. I have a few more weeks to kind of progress with that, and so it's like one of those things where it's definitely like I need to kind of stay in my side inside of myself, but also know I have a few more weeks to progress. Maybe it didn't work out this time, and so kind of riding that fine balance of not kind of doing something that's outside of what I'm capable of, but also not kind of shying away from when something didn't work out perfectly or how I wanted it to.
I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong here, final year in the NCAA. What are the emotions and feelings going into the final few weeks of perhaps your last cross country season?
Yeah, it's yeah, it's kind of a weird feeling. I think what made me really excited about this year in particular is just the prospects of what our team could do. Um, that's been something that I've really hoped for over my last 5 years, and so I think it's honestly just each week. This week has been exciting for me and really enjoyable. I think just going to each meet with the team and feeling like we're progressing, and yeah, it's been honestly something that's, after this many years, like, this feels pretty new for me, having this kind of momentum as a group, and it's something that's, yeah, I definitely wouldn't trade for anything.
How much do you feel like West Virginia, being elevated on this stage as a team has ultimately elevated you in your individual performances. As you mentioned, throughout the years, you guys have gotten consistently better over time, culminating, really well with this, being your final year with the team. How much do you feel like your contributions as an individual pushing the team has ultimately made you run better as an individual?
Yeah, it's something where like I know kind of what we've kind of tried to build and stay consistent with and stay true to kind of how we do things here, and then now having some of the individuals make some breakthroughs, have some new people come on to kind of make some of those goals a reality, I think is just super motivating. And yeah, I think it's just honestly like when you go into races, I think um, knowing that you really are contributing to something that everyone can kind of be proud of, hopefully. And yeah, I think that feeling has just been something that I've really looked for in cross country. I think it's what makes it the most kind of fun and enjoyable part of the NCAA year, really just being able to have that team dynamic. And I really do think it has made me run with a lot of confidence and yeah, motivation, I would say.
Something I want to ask you about. So I mentioned you're an 8-time All-American. You placed third at the NCAA Cross Country National Meet in 2021. You're a 2-time World Championship qualifier. You're an Olympian from Paris this past year. I could read the accomplishments. The list goes on and on and on. What's really unique to me is I feel like your story isn't out there that much. And I think people who follow the running world really closely know who Ceili is. But you definitely are like a very humble person who doesn't showcase her story all that much. For you, do you like kind of being in the shadows, or do you wish there was more spotlight? Because on paper, I mean, those accomplishments stack up against anyone's in the sport. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, I honestly have been fine with I think exactly kind of how um I've maybe been recognized in that kind of way. I think really the small group of and the small community that we have just around our campus, and then as well the support that you feel from other people as well watching is super nice and important. But I think just really being in tune with like the community we have here has always been more than enough for me. And I think um, I've they've kind of felt a lot of the dips and the rises in my career. um, Again, like yeah, on paper there's been some really successful moments, and then I also know that there's been some pretty big disappointments and things that I would have liked to have gone better in my college career. And I feel like um, I think the people around me kind of know that the best. And I think just kind of having that support and them kind of through that with me has always just been important. And honestly, that's kind of enough support for me, and whatever else is there is a nice addition as well. But yeah, I've definitely felt like I've kind of had everything I've needed for sure.
As someone who's in the NCAA landscape, what has it been like, or what was it like to see someone like Parker Valby, or there are other examples where they just immediately get thrown into the fire and it's like overnight success? Everyone's talking about them, a lot of pressure, all the attention goes to that person. What's your general opinion and take on how social media is affecting the state of the NCAA? And do you think it's a positive or negative? And if a negative, like how do you think people can deal with that pressure better?
Yeah, like I think you see it with people like Caitlin Tui and Parker Valby. And I think um, it's like an interesting dynamic. I think it fits better with some people's personalities than others. Some kind of are more able to kind of use that positively and kind of thrive off of it, whereas others, I think I might have a little bit more harder time with it. But at the same time, I think it is um, cool to have those big names kind of in the sport. I think it um, honestly like builds kind of the excitement for people watching. I think as a competitor, um, that doesn't change a whole lot for me, kind of going into to competing against them and that type of thing. You respect them just as much either way. So I think in that way it doesn't change too much for me. But I do think it is really cool to have that visibility and those athletes that have kind of elevated, I guess, the NCAA as a whole. So yeah, I do think overall it's positive, and give them props for being able to kind of handle that pressure, because it definitely is on a broader scale than even what I have, just pressure for myself, or that people that are close to you, but beyond that, having a little bit more of the social media and the media in general pressure is definitely a whole different landscape.
I think a lot of younger people think that only they themselves put pressure on themselves or feel pre-race nerves. And I talk to a lot of people like yourself who are like, no, I feel pressure too. I get nervous before races. Can you talk to the general audience here of, no matter how far you ascend in the sport of running, whether you're in middle school or a professional runner, you're probably always going to have to face some of these things. It doesn't change as you might get better at handling it, but pressure is just innate at any stage.
Yeah, I definitely have felt this through a lot of the other sports that I played, and through, I guess, yeah, as you improve and get better, because I think when you are, I guess, intrinsically motivated to do something, um, you do constantly have kind of to this like period of like self-reflection and all of this, where you want to be as good as you possibly can be, and you feel maybe when you're not doing as well, and the kind of the anytime there's like stagnation in your running, or things aren't going so well, you kind of feel that. You feel then when things are going well, kind of building sense of expectation. And it's, I think, important to kind of be getting better at kind of like acknowledging when I start to feel like that, and then also kind of knowing where that's coming from, how to kind of build off those feelings positively, rather than kind of letting it consume you. I think that's something that I always can work on, kind of using those feelings of pressure or nerves for a benefit, rather than having it turn a little bit more negative. So I really do think it's something that, no matter what level you're at, or stage you're at in your career, it's something that can continue kind of working on.
You mentioned a few responses ago when you were talking about outside pressure and support systems, that a lot of your inner support system of family, friends, teammates, etc., have helped you get through some of those lower moments throughout your collegiate career. Can you share, if you're comfortable with, a setback you've experienced during your time at West Virginia, and how that support system ultimately helped you overcome it, get on the other side of it?
Yeah, like I think I would say, in 2021, I had a pretty good summer. I missed kind of it was still COVID, so the selections for the Olympics were a little bit different, and ended up kind of missing out by a couple seconds. And at that time, that was not something that 3 months earlier was even in kind of the realm of possibility for me. And so, being 19 and I being close to the Olympics, I was like, that's, I've, maybe reached a little bit of a new level in my running, and kind of opened my eyes to maybe what I could kind of achieve. And then going into that cross country season, I was able to win Nutty Comb, and then kind of go on to come third, and then run a good race in Boston. And I think that kind of all happened very quickly. And then over that Christmas break, I had a lot of Achilles problems that I thought it was just going to be pretty brief, and that I would kind of get back into training quickly. And unfortunately, that took a lot longer, and ended up finding out that, I mean, from then the indoor and outdoor season didn't progress quite as well as I wanted, and ended up finding out that I'd torn a few ligaments in my ankle, and that was kind of what was causing a lot of the pain and like instability and all of that stuff. And I think going from being on a really big roll to then having a lot of peaks and valleys, I think was, it caught me off guard of kind of what that would do, where I was still performing well, but it wasn't, I guess, that same trajectory that I had experienced all fall. And I kind of continue to have a lot of those issues for the next year. And it wasn't really until this past spring, when I was able to take I redshirted last fall and then really built a base where I felt like that was kind of the first time I'd had consistent training in a couple years. And I think that time period was just difficult because I think you realize like you may be stuck a little bit, but the rest of the NCAA keeps moving, and people keep improving, people keep having big performances, and I had to kind of learn how to kind of build confidence from things that weren't necessarily tangible all the time, how to stay pretty consistent and just like on my trajectory when it wasn't going so well. And ultimately, I think I attribute that to really the support that's around me, and having coaches that look long term with things, as well as still, I think it helps to have those little successes along the way. I mean, you're still making world championships and doing well in the NCAA, but it wasn't quite the expectations that I had for myself. And so I think now looking back, as I've been able to get a little bit more of that consistency and be on a little bit more of a roll, I think it's something that you look back upon, and it did, I think, make me mature in some ways to where you're really not always going to have that upwards trajectory, and it really is something that you have to just work through, and it could take a few months or it could take a couple years.
Off the top of your head, and by the way, such an excellent response there. There's so much to unpack there. Off the top of your head, what are some of the biggest factors and attributes that you feel like have directly correlated with your success in the sport of running?
Yeah, I think honestly, I would give kind of a lot of that up to my coaches and my teammates, training partner. I think I came in with not a ton of running experience. I started competitively running my last year of high school, so I didn't know a ton about running. I knew that I wanted to compete as best as I could and work really hard, but beyond that, didn't really know a lot about running training. And I think having a coach that was able to take that and recognize some of my strengths, and really help me adapt and kind of believe in my ability long term, I think really just kept me able to see the big picture in a lot of things, which I think obviously, as I kind of mentioned before, you don't always recognize until you're kind of going through a period where you feel a bit stagnant. But at the same time, I think I was always able to see what was important to me about running. And that was kind of the ability to constantly push yourself, to work hard, and to be around like-minded people that kind of also want to do that. And so I think knowing that those were the things I appreciated about running were really what was kind of a key part in being able to, I guess, keep progressing when things don't kind of go your way all the time, and then make it through 6 years of the NCAA. So yeah, I definitely attribute that to the people around me. Having a training partner too, when I first came in, that was a lot older than me, and had experienced the NCAA. She had then been to the Olympics, and so I think also having that experience on that end, to kind of keep things in perspective, and I guess all of those things I think just are things that you might take for granted sometimes, but then looking back, those are really key parts.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that experience in 2021 of taking kind of that next leap in your career and missing the Olympics by just a few seconds. Ultimately, 3 years later, 2024, you make the Olympic team for Canada. What did that moment mean to you, to wear that singlet across your chest, be in that stadium in Paris, and be an Olympian, which you'll have for the rest of your life?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I think when you're very involved in your season, and I had been really starting to kind of feel a little bit more confident this spring in kind of my abilities, and that was really nice. I think it honestly, when I officially qualified, I guess my coach sort of told me, he was like, you have to kind of take a step back and look at this, because 3 or 4 years before, you were kind of lying on the track and knowing that you missed out on the Olympics, and now you're able to have that opportunity. So it was kind of one of those times where I had to step back and be like, no, like this is, it hasn't always felt like that perfect trajectory, but this is kind of what I've been able to do. And so that was a kind of a cool experience, because it was a time where I was starting to feel a little bit more confident. So I felt like, I can go into the Olympics and not just kind of be there and experience it, which already is an opportunity not everyone gets to have, but also then feel like I could kind of compete to my best, which is something that I hadn't really felt in a few years. And to be able to have that feeling kind of at the biggest stage, I think was some progress for me.
With your list of accomplishments, some of which I've read, many more that I could read, and there's still a lot more to accomplish in your collegiate career. It's not like you're hanging up the spikes today. What does it mean to you to contribute to the program of West Virginia in the ways in which you have? Because I think in years past, people maybe don't see it as a top running program or produce talent like you, but you've definitely changed that narrative. What does that mean to you to leave the program better than you found it and create this unbelievable legacy for the school and program?
Yeah, and I think it's been, as you mentioned, like, I think recently we don't always have the reputation of kind of being kind of, a top contending team. I think in that, if you look back a couple decades ago, there was a little bit more of that. And luckily, some of those women are still kind of around the program, former All-Americans and Olympians. And so I think, like, really staying true to wanting to give back to that community that's been really supportive, even when we haven't had as much success as you might like. I think kind of really wanting to so make those people proud, and I think again, like, we've been trying to build something like this for a few years, and then now having the opportunity, I think you're really just kind of grateful for all the support. And I've kind of wanted to be able to stay here for my 6th year, because it is important to all those people as well, and not just to me, to kind of see the team succeed and really be proud of something that we've been working for several years, I guess even before me.
Kaylee, let's go back in time and document some of the process of early Kaylee all the way up to present day. As much as you want to fill in, take me through your start in the sport of running. It sounds like you got a later start, which I'm so curious to hear about. So your background kind of in sports, how you got introduced to running all the way up to present day, and how you've accomplished some of those accomplishments at West Virginia.
So I was early on just really big into sports. Like, I wanted to play as many as I could, and this baseball, basketball, soccer, golf, tennis, like as many things as I could do. My older brother played a lot of those sports, and that was something that I always wanted. Through high school, I kind of narrowed it down a little bit and was played just mainly a lot of soccer, and had full intentions and hopes to kind of play collegiately in that sport, but ended up tearing my ACL in my junior year. And I just knew, like, I could get back to playing, but my goals was always to be as competitive in something as I could be. I love soccer, but it didn't really, to me, it was much matter about the sport as much as kind of reaching my potential in whatever I could do. And I kind of recognized that maybe that window had it was going to look a little bit different for me coming back. And so, fortunately, I had done track in high school, just had gone to the meets and had mainly run like the 400 and the 800, nothing really much more, kind of just showed up to the meets, and kind of thought about then doing cross country. And fortunately was able to have get connected with a really good club coach in my area and have a really good training partner. And it was a very quick and short introduction to running, but I took to it quite well. And I think that was something where not everyone gets that opportunity to kind of have a setback and then immediately, I guess, shift into something else and have it work out pretty smoothly. So I always say, like, I was pretty lucky to have that avenue to go down. And I wasn't super, I wouldn't say I was a high level recruit by any means. Like, when I was first recruited by West Virginia, I had an 800 PR, a 400 PR, and a 5K cross country PR that, when I'm looking back at now, is totally inaccurate and was probably like 400 meters short, but I kept it as I didn't know.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
So I honestly didn't have much to go off of, and that I was very fortunate that my coach Sean Cleary was able to see something that could develop. But yeah, it was a lot of kind of, I would say, like, luck, but also just having somewhat of a belief in myself. I don't know if it was a little bit naive, but just thinking like, I should be able to improve and develop. I'll work hard at it. And so I was like, if someone could just give me a chance to be at this level, I think I can do all right. And so then coming into my freshman year, I didn't have a ton of running experience, but I think I was prepared that I was gonna have to work at it and become a runner rather than just like an all around athlete, I guess.
What would you say to someone out there who has an untraditional kind of background in the sport and maybe has negative thoughts towards that journey? Because I think a lot of times we see like a Jakob Ingebrigtsen example and people get paranoid when they don't have that example of like excessively running from the age of 5. And I love hearing examples like you where it's like you can have a really late start in the sport, and if you consistently work at it, like, it will pay off eventually. So what would you say in terms of your unorthodox journey and where it's led? I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You're an Olympian after all.
Yeah, I definitely think that it really is like gonna look different for everyone. And I would say that just knowing that the experiences that you've had, regardless of whether they're kind of the normal pattern of getting into a sport and progressing, that those experiences are still beneficial. I think there was so many things, playing different sports, in different team dynamics, different coaches, different levels of competition, um, and then the physical parts of being an athlete, working at things. I think all of those really allowed me to progress in running because I didn't really have to change a lot in terms of how I approach sport. I maybe had to learn a little bit more about running and training and how to be a little bit steadier at times. But I think there was nothing where I felt like um, I think what I maybe lost was having a few PRs in high school that would have been a little faster. But I think with running specifically, I think there is such an opportunity to develop late. I think even in the NCAA, you see um, athletes take 3 or 4 years, and then in their senior year they come out and they have a really good season. So I think just, yeah, not undervaluing kind of the experiences you've had, and that ultimately, your path is just maybe going to look a little bit different.
Kaylee, bringing us up here towards present day again, let's talk about remaining weeks of the season. You mentioned a little bit ago how excited you are that the team is in this position. Speaking about yourself individually, you're in a stellar position. What's the dream? When you go to bed, you close your eyes, you think about the end of the cross-country season. What's the ultimate dream for you and the team?
I think honestly, just I I think a lot of the disappointments that I've had um, in kind of my past championships is not being able to perform to what I think is my best when it comes to the championships, whether that's things that happen a couple weeks before that set you back, or something like that. And so I honestly just think like my perfect, I guess the ideal situation was just to be, on the line in Wisconsin as a team, being in the best spot that we possibly can be. And whatever happens beyond that. I mean, I think the NCAA cross country meet is the most unpredictable meet that there really is all year. And so um, if you can just be in a good spot, and then however the race unfolds, that's going to be what you adapt to. But I think really just getting there as prepared as possible is what I kind of hope for.
Last time a cross country championship meet happened in Wisconsin, snow was on the ground. How do we feel about snow, Kaylee?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I mean, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're from Canada, so you should be used to running in the snow. And like, to be honest, don't love it. And I think like no one maybe performs their best in the snow, but I think, you kind of just have to adapt with whatever comes at you. And again, like the NCAA championship is super unpredictable. I've run in Tallahassee in like 70-degree weather, and then Oklahoma State in like 20s. So I think, yeah, you kind of just have to adapt. I think it's not always pleasant, but I think that's kind of the idea of cross country, is that things aren't always going to be super predictable and pleasant. So you kind of have to just adapt. So I think I'll be fine with whatever happens on the day, and yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if there's a foot of snow on the ground. So
Or knowing the Midwest, it's going to be the polar opposite and it's going to be 70 and sunny,
yeah,
or like 50-mile-an-hour winds. You never know. You
we'll
never know
take
with the
that too.
Midwest. Kaylee, final serious question for you, wrapping up our conversation today. For those who have listened to our conversation, look up to you and all that you've accomplished in the sport of running, what would be the final takeaway message that you want to leave with them?
I think just from my experience of 6 years in the NCAA is just um, being really patient with yourself through um, a lot of success and then a lot of disappointments, and really trying to kind of appreciate some of those moments that don't always look super exciting right away. But when you kind of look back at them, I guess taking pride in things that you've been able to accomplish, and really riding that wave, and trying to stay as like even keel as possible. And yeah, really knowing that there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but that kind of makes it, I guess, a really cool experience. And whether you have 4 or 5 or like 6 years in the NCAA, or whatever you're doing, really high school, I think just, yeah, really kind of taking pride in some of the things that you've been able to do, and persist through, and then really enjoying um, your teammates, the sport, I think, is ultimately what's kind of going to make you look back and have kind of fond memories of any experience that you have.
Kaylee, final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single podcast. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Oh, that's tough. This is probably like a boring response, but I'm just like a good like steak and potato kind of person. So like, you give me like a good steak, I'll be happy with that.
I love it. Kaylee, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and wisdom from your super successful career. Yeah, love your story. I think it needs to be distributed more. So it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to break it down with you. And I'm excited to see the impact this one makes, and know my support in the coming weeks of the season, and excited to see all the things you'll accomplish in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking with me today.